Hello, everyone, and welcome to the elcalvariovp podcast. I know it's been a while, several weeks, maybe a month, I don't know. It's been a good while since we last had our last episode.
Too long.
It's true. Brother Irving has been waiting for the next one. He was just there, excited. Oh, when's the next one going to drop? Well, luckily for him, the next one will be about him.
Oh, man.
So we actually have a few guests today. We don't typically do two people, but this month I wanted to try a little different, something different than what we've been doing these last few times. So today we have Brother Irving, and I'm on Yasmin Mayoral. I looked at my computer as if I don't know you guys. Like, I had to look to make sure I got the names right. How you guys been?
Been good. Very blessed and highly favored.
How's life? How's the summer been? I know you guys have been busy with a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Quite busy.
Very
Schedules
busy.
filled, but still blessed and highly favored, like you said.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Did you guys, I guess for those that I don't think anyone knows, you guys were more like involved in the Spanish camp this year.
Yeah.
How was that experience like? Just taking on like a little bit more responsibility.
It was very good. I mean, I guess how the summer's been very, very busy. Even leading up to it, there's a lot to it. It's not just those 3 days, but
Pre-planning.
a lot of planning and preparing for the event. And I was very blessed with worship and the sermons that happened. I think it was a great camp. But yeah, it was a lot of work, but very happy to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about, right? Is serving, working in ministry, but doing it as like a married couple. Because as I was explaining to you all before, it's just something that I think is maybe not talked enough about, or not necessarily like we need to talk about it, but just something that I think would be interesting just to know a little bit more about how that works. So we're going to get into that topic a little bit and in just a moment. But before we do, just again, thank you all for watching. Continue to like, follow, share, subscribe, whatever you need to do to just get more people to listen to this podcast. I know little by little we're growing, so let's just see if we can keep that going, you know?
Yeah.
So before we actually get into this topic of ministry and working together, I actually wanted to ask you guys just like some marriage questions in general, because in case people don't know, you guys are married.
We sure are.
Yeah.
I sent you all a little outline, but I didn't write this last thing, because I don't think I asked you the last time you were on the podcast.
Oh, man.
But do you remember how you proposed to Labana Yasmin?
Do I remember? Absolutely, I remember.
You should remember, right?
I remember. She remembers, and I think the church might remember. I don't know. But
Do you want to share it?
we have recordings. You can share it if you want.
Go ahead.
So it was Sunday service. Beforehand, I talked to Brother Rito, who was the pastor at the time, and told him what my plans were and how I was going to propose. And he said, "Yeah, do it during service, and make it happen." So at the time, I was the music leader, which is what you currently are. But I asked Brother Rito if I could, use that as somehow a segue to proposing. So that Sunday, I asked all the singers and all the musicians to stand up, and Sister Yasmin, my wife, was a singer at the time. So I had everyone stand up. I thanked everyone for their help, sacrifice, and in serving in the music department. And I intentionally left her last, and that's when I proposed to her in front of everyone. So.
It's funny. I don't know if you remember, but I remember standing, like you asked everyone to stand, and you're going like one by one, thanking them for, everything they do for the music department. And I'm like, he's not going to thank me in front of the whole church. So I actually sat down. And then at the end, I don't know if you told me or your sister was next to you. Maybe like she nudged me because I think she knew what you're going to do. And I was like, oh, okay, he really is. And it honestly did not hit me until you were like, can you please come forward? I was like, wait, no one else went forward to receive thanks. What's going on?
She got a special thank you.
Apparently, yes, I did.
Yes. I remember that now. For a second, I was like, how did it happen? Oh, that's right.
There's a video. We have a video, right?
Yeah.
Although I don't remember the thanking like every individual person.
Yeah. I think I grouped you with like your dad at the time.
Oh.
You guys were like-
and
the guitarist.
Like, my thing.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. But I guess staying on the topic a little bit, like what made you make that decision, saying like now is the time to do it?
That's a great question. Why did I make the decision as to now's the time? Well, I really cared for Sister Yasmin very much at the time, and I knew I did want to spend the rest of my life with her. And again, I talked to my pastors, I talked to my parents. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just going based off emotion and feeling, because that changes from one day to the other. And with their counsel, it just made sense to do it at that time. Although I didn't have everything lined up in my life, I knew that if we can put God in the center of our life, it was going to work out. We're going to be in God's hands. And I did have some plans, it just made sense.
And Sister Yasmin, did you kind of have like an idea that it was going to happen soon, that he was going to propose, or?
We did. We had talked about marriage, it's important to have those conversations before actually popping the question. So we talked about it. Yeah. We, just make sure we're on the same page with things. And so I knew it was, gonna happen. I didn't think it was gonna happen that quick. Surely did not think it was gonna happen that day.
You talking about the day before and then the next day?
We'll do it tomorrow.
No. There was a couple weeks of conversations just leading up to that, and I just wanted to make sure that I was going to get a yes, right? Or if she was going to be indifferent, then we were going to have to talk about.
Is that what you did in front of everyone?
She has to say yes,
no.
So thinking about because I know you all married at a more, I guess it would be typically a younger age,
Mm-hmm.
right? So at that time, what did you think marriage meant?
Yeah, I think my expectations for marriage was getting a chance to live your life with your best friend. I mean, I knew it was a lifelong commitment. I knew it wasn't something that it's just an off the whim decision. I knew it was something important. I was going to build a life with this person and share a bowl of hot Cheetos with that night. That was my thought initially.
Really, the same. Just spending your life with your best friend, building a life together, eventually building a family together. So those are my expectations. And, with someone who would share their hot Cheetos with me, so.
And so early on in that marriage, were there any almost light bulbs, oh, I didn't expect this to be something like a challenge, an obstacle, or just any either positive or negative that you're oh, this is something I didn't expect from marriage?
Yeah, pretty quick. I learned that I didn't like sharing my hot Cheetos. So that was, and it's so funny. We laugh about it now, but I mean that was something that we had to talk about. I don't like the way you eat my hot Cheetos.
This is true.
She grabs handfuls of hot Cheetos and she just eats them without savoring them. You got to eat them one by one, and you got to start with the smallest piece and then with the biggest.
You're very particular with the way you eat.
Just my hot Cheetos.
So then, years have passed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Has your thought on marriage or what it kind of means changed since then? Your overall view of what it means to be married?
Yeah, I think some of the initial thoughts that I had, they've evolved. I don't think they've changed, but I think they've just evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Where I initially thought about building a home and a family. Now my thoughts are building what we hear nowadays, an apostolic legacy, right? And what I mean by that is I was actually talking to someone about this the other day. My main priority as a husband and as a father is making sure that if and when the Lord comes, we're all ready for that. What we do, if the Lord grants us 100 years in this life, is minuscule compared to eternity. And I want to make sure that I'm ready, my family's ready, and future generations from my line are ready. So God willing, I know I'll have an impact in my kids' lives, right? Getting them ready, but also their kids. And they say, 3-4 generations down the line, you're forgotten. And that's primarily the truth. But if I can leave this truth behind to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if the Lord tarries and they're still around, they're ready. So that's one of the mindsets that's changed about being in a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and just being intentional with that. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add or change.
No, yeah, not change. I think that's definitely true. Definitely 100%. I think something that my eyes were open to with marriage, but I think also just realizing that marriage is something so much more intricate and just ever evolving. There's seasons you go through. There's growth and learning done together as husband and wife, and also just separate. But then also learning that your spouse is truly like your best friend, but also your covering over you, over your children.
That's a good answer. So let's get into a little bit more about the ministry side, right? Because I remember the last time Brother Irving was here for the podcast, we talked a little bit about your testimony and kind of how you started serving at the church. You were always just saying yes to things, being available, and slowly but surely started getting more and more involved here at Calvary. So as that was happening, we actually didn't really touch about your marriage. So like the very end when we mentioned, you also got married. But as all that was kind of progressing, Sister Yasmin, what was kind of going on through your mind? Like, because obviously, Brother Irving, you guys were married for a lot of those moments where you were starting to do more and more. So were you kind of just like, well, I guess this is what's going to happen. Let's do this together, or what exactly how was that mindset?
It was exciting. I always knew that. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say I always knew. It was shared, and it's shared, with me, and just really pushed on me. Brother Irving has a calling on his life from before we got married with Sister Ann. She would always talk to me. I know he has a calling on his life, and God has called him to do more. Like you have to remember that. And so, I mean, just seeing him, come to that calling and different. And to different capacities as well. It's exciting. I think when we first got married is when you became the music leader, music director. Maybe even a little bit before that. But just to see you evolve in that, and then from every door that God has opened after that, and just seeing how he would keep just stay kingdom minded. Not get a big head about it or anything. Just kingdom minded. Just really exciting to see. Really awesome.
So what's it been like working together in ministry then? How exactly does that work?
Yeah, I think for every marriage and ministry, it's a little bit different, but I think there's some core principles that stay the same. In our particular case, when we're working in the ministry, when I do get opportunities to preach out, when I can, I love to bring my family with me. I'd like to bring my wife with me. I know that when I do, she's a prayer warrior in the altar. Like she can pray for people and minister to them while there's an altar call going, after a sermon. And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes I can't take my family. Either I'm traveling too far. We've got 4 kids, so I mean it's not easy. But when they're not able to come, and if my wife's not able to come, I know her intercessory prayers. I think that's how you say it, right? Intercessory really help. I mean, they encourage and they do lift me up. I really do believe that. But also working in the ministry, and I think we talked about this the first time, is not just the pulpit. It's not just preaching. That's an important part, and it's very important. But ministry is really serving the Lord in any capacity that you can. And my wife's done a great job in allowing me to do that and being able to serve, not just with preaching, but with my time and the little abilities that God's given me that I can share with other people. So, I think about specifically with Jesus and the 12 apostles, when the apostles are fighting amongst each other and they're saying, who's the greatest among them, right? And basically Jesus responds with the one who serves, And if that means that we've got to open on a Saturday and not be able to go out to eat or have plans as a family Saturday night, we're all serving in the ministry that day. And we do it joyfully, and they all come. My wife comes, and to me that's ministry. She's ministering with me on that on a Saturday, and if we can bring our kids, we bring our kids to help out, because I want them to understand that ministry is not just a pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just preaching, but it's actually serving and helping wherever you can. But I know Hermana Yasmin wants to add.
Working together in ministry, I think exactly what he said, especially in our season right now with 4 littles. Well, one of them, not so little, but, you know, they're kids. I think it's just working in ministry just looks a little bit different depending on where we are in our season, where it is that you need to serve. But definitely whether it's, you know, if we can come here on a Saturday night, get ready for Sunday the next day, we're bringing the kids with us. But from my end, as like a mother and as a wife, it's just making sure that I'm keeping him covered, but also making sure that I've got things covered with the kids covered at home, making sure things are running smoothly, because if I can have that running smoothly, then he can make sure that whatever God's calling him to do to whatever capacity is running smoothly. So I think working together, it's a lot like we're not 2 different tools, you know, like you're doing your thing over there and I'm doing my thing over here, but we're like one instrument. And if if I could get this side going, he's got that side going, and it's just a good flow like that, and you know, makes things, I think, easier and able to achieve whatever God's calling him or us, you know, to do.
Yeah. I don't know why it reminded me of, I think it was when I had Pastor and Sister Lourdes here. I think they also mentioned something like of how the dynamic works between a couple. I think it was Sister Lourdes to mention, like saying it's like someone if you're like climbing a mountain or something tall, that if you go up, then you have to help the other person get up, and then they go up, and you just kind of like help each other elevate and just kind of move that way.
Yeah.
So it seems very much like that's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
How it should work. You're just working together as a unit to just continually grow and evolve in the relationship that we have with God.
Yeah, absolutely.
So were there any sort of, obviously there have been, like challenges or difficulties, anything maybe that you didn't consider at the moment? You're like, oh, this is something that, as you guys were serving, like, oh, I didn't really anticipate this to be some sort of obstacle or challenge, really.
I think as newlyweds or rookies in the marriage game, I think there was a lot of misunderstanding on expectations or what that looked like or what that meant. You know, that was one thing. Another thing is, and you hear it all the time, you know, certain preachers talk about, you know, you don't want your marriage to die on the altar of ministry. And, you know, serving in the ministry, you can definitely see that, where you invest more time in other things, descuidas, you don't take care of at home. So I never want to reach to that point where my family dies on the altar of ministry. My first job, my first ministry is my family. Like we talked about at the beginning, that's really what I want to build. I want to build that apostolic Pentecostal Christian legacy with my family. In order to do that, I need to invest time with them. I need to invest time in my marriage. I need to invest time with my kids, and I need to be intentional about it. So if that means blocking out a day on the calendar and this is our day, then that's what we're going to do. It's all about being intentional.
Yeah.
Early on, you're just kind of going with the flow. This door opens up, okay, I'm going to go through it. This door opens up, all right, I'm going to go through it. Now when doors open up, I have to think twice, right? Yes, I'm going to be serving in some capacity, but how does this affect my family? How does this affect my primary ministry, which is my family? So to answer your question, challenges, difficulties, is understanding that. And it took me some time to get to that point where a door opened up and then I had to stop and ask that question, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I think same thing, just really understanding expectations and, you know, like what you said, just really communicating, making time for one another, just making sure you're staying connected. But also I think a struggle for me, probably more so once, you know, we had kids and, you know, if I couldn't go with you, I think a lot of the times, you know, especially women can see like other women like, oh, well, they get to go out to preach and, you know, they get to do this. And well, I mean, if that's their season, that's their season. But just understanding that, you know, in my season, my role was at home. And that's, you know, as much as he's ministering out, you know, that I'm ministering at home to the kids. So understanding that, yeah, that's a ministry in and of itself, and that's my number one ministry as a mother. I think also just understanding really too, if you in Genesis talks about how God created a help meet for man, and just understanding if you look at the Hebrew breakdown of that word, I can't remember what it is in Hebrew, but it means help and strength. So understanding that a woman to her husband, especially ministry, should be a help to him, an asset, something to build him up, and a strength. So if I'm not, like I said before, I'm not taking care of things at home, that's not really strengthening him to be able to confidently go and focus on on the kingdom.
So then, talking about, because you were mentioning like early on, you guys were realizing, for any newlyweds or any couples that are either just starting in serving, right, or people that are interested in serving like that as a married couple, what sort of advice would you kind of have for them? Or is it more along the same lines?
Yeah. So I think there's two things that I would share. The first thing goes hand in hand with what I just said. Communication is key. I mean, and specifically when you're talking about ministry, you guys need to communicate, what does serving mean? Because serving can mean something different to you compared to Hermana Katy, who's hiding in the shadows. But I think about in Joshua chapter 24, Joshua calls all the leaders. He calls all the elders, the judges, anyone that's important to a meeting, and he shares that God has a word for them. So he then shares, God lists a bunch of things that he's done for the people of Israel. Before, they worshipped other gods. They were in slavery. They fought many battles, but God was always with them. God always gave them the victory. God always kept his promise. And then Joshua says, fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly, right? Put away forever the idols from your ancestors and the idols from Egypt, and serve the Lord alone, right? That's what Joshua tells his people. Then Joshua says, you have to make your decision. You have to make your decision right now what you're going to do. And this is a well-known verse that people say. Joshua then says, but as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? You can't do it a medias. You can't do it halfway. If you're going to serve in the ministry, if you're going to serve, you got to do it at 100%. And your spouse needs to understand that. They need to be on board. I can't tell you how many testimonies I've heard from other ministers as they were courting. And while they were courting, they would tell their future spouse or whomever they were courting, hey, this is what God's called me to do. If you're not on board, this is not going to work, right? Because there's a clear communication, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and you're either going to get on board, and if you're not, it's just not going to work out. So you need to have that communication, truthfully, even before you get married, but even after you get married, you need to have that constant communication, because it's very, very easy to get lazy, spiritually lazy, and sit on a spiritual seat. And if you have those communications before, during, and early on in your marriage, your spouse should be very good at holding you accountable. Hey, remember our conversations we had. Remember the goals that you have. Remember what you shared with me, what ministry is. Are we doing that? We can do it. Animando, encouraging and pushing one another. So that's one thing, communication, setting that expectation as to what serving means. The second thing is, and very, very important, and I share this because of experience. You have to allow your pastor, the man of God in your life, to speak and minister in your life. Very, very important. Just because you have a willingness to serve in the ministry, it does not mean that you are excluded from being ministered to, right? Everyone needs a even our pastor has a pastor, and that should tell you something. If someone doesn't have a pastor, you need to be wary of that person, right? You need to be ministered to. It's very, very important to have a covering over your life, over your marriage, and over your ministry as well. So if I could give those two pieces of advice, that's what I would give.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the same thing. Number one, just communication. I think beforehand, like he said, understanding what serving means to you, what serving means to your spouse, or your future spouse, and just understanding that there's different capacities, that you can serve together, that maybe, he'll be called to do something and you might have to, stay back, but remembering it's all for the kingdom, it's all, no matter what you're doing, it's for the kingdom. And I think just having those conversations early on, before marriage, if possible, if someone's called to be, an overseas missionary, if you didn't have that conversation and, hey, I don't really want to go overseas. Well, that's, but yeah, so just communicating. And then even once you are in ministry, just continue communicating and pouring into your marriage, just staying in touch with one another, asking, hey, how are you doing? And then I think this probably should have said first is just praying. So, we pray for one another, I think, constantly. Obviously we have each other covered in prayer, but I think it's also possible to kind of focus prayer for your husband's ministry, your spouse's ministry. So if they're, currently being called for this, find a Bible verse that you can just apply to that season, to that calling for, that you're currently in, and then that might shift and you might find another Bible verse that you can, speak over your spouse. So I think that, along with, your spiritual covering as well, like you said, very important.
All right. I think we're running about the end of time here. Just one final question before we conclude here, and I didn't put this down in the notes, but what's been your favorite thing about marriage?
Favorite thing about marriage? Spending time with your best friend. That's it.
I think, just creating the life that we've created together, and to see, like, we started off with so little. We were young, newlyweds. I think you were the only one working at the time. So, and just to see how God has blessed us and how we've grown, and, with my best friend. So.
There you go. Well, thank you, Familia Mayoral, for joining us here today. Hopefully everyone that's been watching and listening enjoyed it, got something out of it. I most definitely did. So thank you both again for joining us here.
Thank you for
Always
having
a
us.
Pleasure to have the Familia Mayoral. Maybe we'll have you on again. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe we'll see. I don't know.
We'll see how this does.
I don't know.
If people ask for you, you never know.
I don't understand.
But again, thank you again for joining us. And for everyone watching, listening, thank you for that as well. Continue to follow, share, subscribe, all that stuff.
Follow.
Yes.
Subscribe.
And until the next one, have a great day.